I once believed my life was set in stone, a steady rhythm of routine, love, and unshakable trust. My name is Michael, and for years I built my world around what I thought were the values of loyalty and honesty. I had a beautiful wife, Emily, whose gentle smile and creative spirit filled our home with warmth. We had shared countless dreams and forged a future together that, by all appearances, was perfect. My father had taught me the importance of family, and my own father-in-law, Richard, was a figure of respect and tradition in our lives. But in retrospect, I now see that every solid structure hides its cracks until the inevitable moment when those fissures widen into irreparable chasms. It began with small details that I dismissed as the everyday eccentricities of a busy household. At first, I noticed that Emily seemed a little distant sometimes, a fleeting moment when her eyes wandered off as if searching for something just beyond my grasp. I chalked it up to exhaustion or the quiet preoccupations that sometimes settled over her during our hectic mornings. But soon, those brief moments of distraction became more frequent and more disturbing. It wasn't merely that she was tired. There was something in the way she carried herself, a subtle change in her tone when she was near Richard. Richard had always been a commanding presence, an old-school gentleman with a stern exterior and a lifetime of experiences etched into his lined face. I had admired him not only as the father of the woman I loved, but also as someone who embodied the very principles of honor and discipline. And yet, in the hushed corners of our family gatherings and during quiet afternoons at home, I began to suspect that something was off. There were moments when Emily and Richard exchanged glances that went beyond the bounds of polite conversation. Their smiles held secrets, and their touch, once just a sign of familial affection, began to hint at something far more intimate and dangerous. One rainy evening, I returned home earlier than usual, expecting nothing more than the comfort of my routine. The house was darker than usual, and the familiar hum of our daily life was replaced by an eerie silence. I walked through the foyer with an inexplicable heaviness in my chest until I reached the living room. There, I saw them, Emily and Richard sitting together on the sofa. They were close, too close, and their conversation, hushed and intense, was punctuated by the occasional lingering look that sent a chill down my spine. I remember feeling frozen in that moment, unable to process the reality that was slowly dawning on me. My heart pounded in my ears as I retreated quietly, my mind racing with questions. Had I really misread the countless subtle signals for so long? How could the two people I trusted most, my loving wife and the man I had once admired as a father figure, betray the sanctity of our family in such a profound way? That night, I lay awake in the dark, replaying every memory of shared laughter and gentle touch. Each recollection was now tainted by the growing suspicion that something had been building beneath the surface for far too long. I began to scrutinize the smallest details, the way Emily's hand would linger on Richard's arm during casual conversation, the secretive smiles exchanged when I wasn't looking, and the furtive glances that spoke of unspoken confessions. What started as a vague sense of unease had evolved into a gnawing certainty that the foundation of my marriage and the integrity of our family was cracking apart. I spent the following days in a state of inner turmoil. I sought solace in long walks by the river, trying to drown my doubts in the rhythmic flow of water and the rustling of autumn leaves. But no matter where I went, the images of Emily and Richard haunted me. I began to document my thoughts in a journal, desperate to capture every detail of a reality that was becoming increasingly unbearable. I questioned every conversation and every casual interaction, trying to piece together when and how this betrayal had taken root. The more I observed, the more I realized that this was no fleeting lapse or misinterpretation. The signs were too consistent and too deliberate. The deep, painful sense of betrayal was now an undeniable part of my daily life. I felt isolated in my grief, trapped between the loving memories of our past and the dark, destructive force of the secret that had shattered that past. I was a man divided, one part clinging desperately to the hope that I was mistaken, and the other consumed by the realization that my entire world was collapsing. Even as I wrestled with these harrowing thoughts, I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy. I continued to work, to participate in family events, and to smile when asked about my day. Yet every shared laugh and every mundane conversation became a painful reminder of the lies that now lay hidden behind every gesture. I knew that soon I would have to confront the truth, but the very thought of doing so filled me with dread. How could I possibly face the two people I had loved and respected? And what would become of our family once the truth was laid bare? The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and though I clung to the hope that there might be a way to mend the rift, I sensed that nothing would ever be the same again. My heart, once full of unwavering trust, was now shrouded in a deep, unrelenting darkness. I realized that I was on the precipice of a journey from which there might be no return, a journey that would force me to confront not only the betrayal of my wife and father-in-law, but also the vulnerable, often painful truths about my own identity. That is where my story truly begins, the moment when the perfect facade cracked, revealing a reality more brutal and heartbreaking than I ever imagined. In the days that followed that fateful evening, the weight of the secret pressed down on me with unbearable force. I found myself constantly questioning every detail of my life. Every interaction that once brought comfort now turned into a source of torment. My mind, once a place of order and calm, had become a swirling storm of doubts and memories that I could no longer ignore. Every time I saw Emily's face, so familiar and once the embodiment of love, I was reminded of the betrayal that lay hidden in her eyes. And every time I encountered Richard, the man I had once respected as a pillar of wisdom and integrity, I was struck by the gnawing realization that he had become the unlikely catalyst for my undoing. I began to notice things I had previously taken for granted, the way Emily's laughter now seemed hollow, the deliberate manner in which she avoided my questioning gaze, and the secretive way Richard's eyes would dart away whenever our eyes met. Each detail, each subtle shift in behavior, added another layer to my growing despair. I took to wandering the quiet streets at night, seeking refuge in the darkness from the relentless pain that the daylight only seemed to magnify. On these solitary walks, the cool air did little to numb the burning ache in my heart. I would replay the scenes over and over in my mind, every tender moment we had once shared, now seen in the harsh light of betrayal. I questioned myself relentlessly. How had I been so blind? What warning signs had I missed? And more agonizingly, how could the people I trusted have allowed themselves to slip so far into the arms of temptation? One particularly bitter evening, I found myself back at the place where I had first glimpsed the forbidden closeness between Emily and Richard. I sat on a park bench beneath a solitary street lamp, the cold metal a stark contrast to the searing heat of my emotions. In that moment of solitude, tears flowed freely down my face as I struggled to come to terms with the fact that my home, a sanctuary that once held the promise of endless love, had become a crucible of lies and deception. I felt betrayed not only by their actions but by the very fabric of the life I had believed in so completely. Desperate for clarity, I turned once more to my journal. With trembling hands, I began to write down every painful detail, every sliver of doubt, and every vivid memory. I wrote of the secret glances, the hushed whispers, and the deep, unspoken emotions that had transformed our interactions into a web of deceit. Each word was a stab in my already wounded heart, but it also served as a cathartic release, a way to externalize the agony that threatened to consume me entirely. Yet, even as I wrote, a part of me clung desperately to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. That perhaps the signs were misread, that the connection between Emily and Richard was nothing more than the affectionate bond of a close-knit family. I wanted to believe that there was a rational explanation for the unexplainable, that the betrayal I feared so deeply was merely a figment of my imagination. But the evidence was undeniable, and the more I searched my memories, the more I realized that every quiet moment, every whispered conversation, had been a step toward this devastating truth. My days became a blur of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, disbelief, and a numb resignation that I could no longer shake. At work, I found it increasingly difficult to focus as my mind drifted back to the secrets at home. Colleagues remarked on my pallor and the haunted look in my eyes, but I offered only vague smiles and feigned normalcy. Inside, I was unraveling, piece by painful piece. I started to distance myself from the people around me, retreating into a shell of isolation in an attempt to preserve what little remained of my shattered identity. Friends reached out with kind words and offers of support, but I could barely bring myself to accept their sympathy. How could they understand the depths of the betrayal, the way it had shattered the very core of my being? I felt abandoned not only by the two people I loved but also by the universe itself, which seemed to conspire to leave me alone in my despair. As weeks turned into months, the strain of keeping this secret weighed heavily on me. I began to notice that even the smallest interactions with Emily now filled me with an overwhelming mixture of nostalgia and anguish. A tender smile, a gentle touch, each memory was a reminder of the life we had built together and the love that had been so violently torn apart. In moments of rare solitude, I found myself questioning if I could ever reclaim the sense of security and trust that had once been the cornerstone of my existence. But amid the darkness, there remained a stubborn ember of resolve. I knew that I could no longer live in this state of constant torment. I had to confront the betrayal head-on, to force the truth out into the open, even if it meant shattering the remnants of the family I had once held dear. With a heavy heart and a mind set on uncovering every hidden secret, I resolved that the time for denial was over. I would no longer allow the shadows of deception to dictate the course of my life. That decision, while laced with fear and uncertainty, marked the beginning of a journey into the deepest parts of my soul. A journey that would force me to face not only the betrayal of those closest to me, but also the painful truths about my own vulnerabilities and shortcomings. In that moment, as I stared into the darkness of a sleepless night, I vowed that I would find the strength to bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging inside me on the day I finally gathered the courage to confront the source of my anguish. I returned home that fateful afternoon with a heavy heart and a determination forged in the crucible of endless nights and painful solitude. I knew that there would be no turning back once I laid bare the secrets that had been poisoning my life, but I also understood that the truth, no matter how devastating, was the only path to reclaiming the remnants of my shattered self. I walked through the front door with my senses on high alert. Every creak of the floor, every shadow dancing on the walls, felt like a harbinger of the impending reckoning. As I approached the living room, I saw them, Emily and Richard, sitting together on the sofa, their heads close in hushed conversation. The sight hit me like a physical blow, a confirmation of everything I had feared. For a long, agonizing moment, I stood frozen, the world around me reduced to a blur of sound and silence. My voice, when it finally emerged, was raw and unsteady. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, each word heavy with the weight of my despair. The room fell silent as the two turned to face me. Emily's eyes, wide with shock and guilt, met mine while Richard's expression shifted from feigned calm to a pained resignation. In that charged moment, the facade of our once happy family shattered completely. Emily began to speak, her voice trembling with a mixture of regret and sorrow. She told me of her loneliness, of feeling trapped in a life that had slowly eroded the passion she once felt, and of the unexpected solace she found in Richard's company. Her words were a torrent of conflicting emotions, apologies intermingled with explanations that offered little comfort. Richard, in his own quiet way, added his confession, a lifetime of unfulfilled dreams and regrets that had led him to seek connection in the only way he believed he could reclaim a semblance of lost youth. Every word they uttered pierced me like a knife. I listened in a daze as they described the secret meetings, the stolen moments, and the slow, inexorable drift away from the life we had all once shared. The living room, the very place where I had envisioned spending the rest of my life with my beloved family, had become the stage for an act of betrayal so profound that it threatened to consume me entirely. Overwhelmed by the raw intensity of the moment, I could no longer maintain my composure. "I need space," I managed to say, my voice cracking as the full magnitude of my heartbreak washed over me. I turned and fled from that room, from the echoes of their confessions, into the stormy night. Outside, the rain fell in relentless sheets, mirroring the tears that flowed freely down my cheeks as I wandered the darkened streets, consumed by the realization that my life would never be the same. That night, in the solitude of the tempest, I vowed that I would not let this betrayal define me entirely. Though every step away from that shattered home felt like a descent into a deeper abyss, I resolved to reclaim my identity from the wreckage of deceit. I knew that the road to healing would be long and painful, filled with moments of doubt and despair, but it was the only way forward if I was to ever find peace again. The confrontation had shattered the illusion of perfection and exposed the raw underbelly of our family's secrets. In the days that followed, I found myself caught between a desperate desire for retribution and a quieter, more painful longing for understanding. I scoured every memory for clues, trying to comprehend not only how I had been so deceived, but also how we had arrived at this tragic crossroads. I reached out to trusted friends and sought solace in long-forgotten hobbies, all the while wrestling with the realization that the betrayal was a part of a much larger, more complex tapestry of human frailty. I came to see that the pain inflicted upon me was not solely the result of one single act of infidelity. It was the culmination of years of unspoken words, unmet expectations, and the slow erosion of trust. Even as I struggled with these harsh truths, I began to accept that the journey toward healing would require me to confront not only the external betrayal but also the internal wounds that I had long ignored. The storm within me had finally found its outlet, and I knew that only by embracing that pain could I hope to rebuild the broken pieces of my life. In the months following that fateful confrontation, my life entered a long, arduous process of recovery. I left the home that had once been a sanctuary of love and retreated to a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. The space was small and sparse, yet it provided me with the solitude I desperately needed to begin healing. Every day was a struggle as I worked to piece together the remnants of my shattered trust and mend the fractured parts of my soul. I sought therapy and attended support groups for those who had experienced profound betrayal. In these sessions, I learned that healing was not a linear journey, but a complex tapestry woven from acceptance, self-reflection, and ultimately forgiveness. I began to write again, pouring my raw emotions onto paper and chronicling every painful memory and every hopeful spark that emerged from the darkness. With time, I realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it was, did not solely define me. It was but one chapter in a much larger narrative of resilience and self-discovery. I continued to reflect on the years before the betrayal, those moments of genuine love and companionship that had once filled my life with promise. I recalled the laughter, the shared dreams, and even the quiet moments of tenderness that now seemed almost like echoes of another lifetime. In doing so, I began to see that while the betrayal had irrevocably altered the course of my life, it also forced me to confront truths about myself that I had long ignored. I had been too complacent, too trusting, and perhaps too afraid to acknowledge the cracks in the facade of perfection. In time, a tentative meeting was arranged, a final, painful attempt at closure with Emily and Richard. We met in a small, neutral cafe where the anonymity of the setting allowed raw emotions to surface without the overwhelming weight of past memories. There, over hours of halting conversation and tearful confessions, each of us confronted our own role in the tragic unfolding of events. Emily expressed deep remorse for the pain she had caused, admitting that her loneliness and unfulfilled desires had driven her to seek solace in the only way she knew. Richard, with quiet sorrow, accepted the part he played in an affair that he had once believed might redeem his own failures. For me, the meeting was a bittersweet acknowledgement of a betrayal that could never be undone, but also a small step toward releasing the hold it had on my soul. Returning from that meeting, I felt the weight of the past slowly begin to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. Though the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer defined me entirely. I began to reforge old friendships, return to hobbies that had once brought me joy, and slowly, painfully, rebuild my life from the fragments of a broken dream. The journey was far from over, and every day brought its own challenges, but I found solace in the idea that even the deepest wounds could, over time, transform into sources of strength. Now, as I sit in the quiet of my modest apartment, I look back on the tumultuous events that reshaped my world. The forbidden affair that tore apart my family was a betrayal so profound that it forced me to question every aspect of my identity, my beliefs, my trust, and even my capacity for love. And yet, in facing that darkness head-on, I discovered a resilience within myself that I never knew existed. Though the pain remains, it now serves as a testament to my journey, a reminder that even in the face of the most shattering betrayal, the human spirit can find a way to rise again, piece by painful piece. This is my story, a chronicle of love turned to sorrow, trust betrayed, and the long, winding road toward redemption. It is a reminder that behind every shattered facade lies the potential for rebirth, and that even in our darkest moments, there is hope for a new day.